Hey, I'm Pat, and in this video we'll be going over the touched event in Roblox Studio. The touched event itself isn't really a super complicated event or anything, but there's a lot of parts to it, a lot of different things to it that can be kind of confusing, and there's a lot of useful information that I can go over with the touched event that can give you some insight on other things in the game. So it's just a good topic overall. I probably should have done a video earlier on it, but here we are. So the way the touched event works is you usually would have a part, right? And whenever the part is touched, it will fire the event. And also what happens is whenever the touch is updated, so if a player moves inside of a part, like every time that the player moves, like their position is updated, then the touched event will fire each time that they move, pretty much. And you can also see there's a can touch property. If this is turned off, then the touch event will not fire when the part's touched. So we're just gonna start off with like a simple script for it, right? And we're gonna go over a few things with the touched event, but first thing is we're gonna go over how to access it. So you just make a reference to the part you want to I don't know, I'm like actually kind of sick right now, but it's alright. So you just make a reference to the part that you want to be touched. So in this case it's just going to be the parent of the script because we put the script into the part. And then the part should have the touched event, which should auto complete for you. And then we just connect it to a function like normal, right? We use the connect method to connect it to a function. And then the touched event will also return the part that touched it. So obviously we had the first part here, right? Which is the parent of the script, but we don't have the part that touched the part that we're listening on, right? But it will give that to us as the first parameter here. So usually people just call it hit, but you could call it other things like, I don't know, it's up to you, touch or whatever. I don't know, there's not really other good names for it. It's a pretty good name. So what we can do now is we can pretty much do things with this part that touched it to figure out what we want to do with it. So for example, we want to check to see if a character touched a part, like a player walked into it, for example, like a lava part or something that damages the player once they touch it, right? So in order for us to figure out if a character touched a part, we have to figure out if the character has a humanoid. So I'm just going to do something real quick and click test, right? Just to show as an example. So if we go into the Explorer under workspace, we can see our character here, right? It's a model. If we go under it, we can see we have all these different parts in it. And what happens is one of these parts touches this brick right here, right? It will give us the part that touched it. So it'll be like probably like one of the foots or something, like right foot or something. And then what we need to do is find the humanoid, which is right here. So usually what we would do is do hit.parent.humanoid, and we would check to see if it has a humanoid. But there's also a chance of an accessory colliding, and in that case then you have to do parent 2 times. So usually you're just gonna be checking for a humanoid, like a normal part. Otherwise it gets kind of complicated. Not really like complicated, but it's kind of more accurate to test for these because players might have accessories that are changing their hitbox kind of. So what we do is we're going to use the find first child method to check to see if we can find a humanoid inside the hits parent. So we'll just make a variable to hold our humanoid, and we'll do hit.parent, which will get us to the character if it is actually a player, and we'll do find first child humanoid. You can also do find first child which is a humanoid, which is a little bit more accurate in case of the humanoid having its name changed by like an exploiter or something, but it's alright for this, not too important, right? So find first child, just to recap, will return nil if it doesn't find a child with the name that you gave it, and it will return the child that has the matching name if it finds a child. So if it finds a child called humanoid, it will store humanoid in our humanoid variable, but if it doesn't, then it'll store nil in our humanoid variable. Then we can just use an if statement to check if our humanoid variable has data inside of it. Nil is pretty much the same thing as having no data inside of it. It's the same thing as being false. So if we just do if humanoid, pretty much what you're doing is checking to see if there's data stored inside of our variable. And if there is, then we can continue on with our script because we know that what hit is part of the character now, right? So the next thing I want to do is go over how to damage the player. So in order to damage the character, you need to get their humanoid, which we have already done, right? And then you just use the take damage method, and then inside the argument or the parentheses here, you pass how much damage you want to give it do. So we're just gonna do like 10. Right, and we're gonna put it on output in case we get an error, but I think it'll work first try, right? Alright, so you see we took damage, but you can see it just kept giving us damage even after, you know, we're just kind of sitting on it. You see how much damage we took because our part's position is being updated a lot as we touched a part. So every time that our position is being updated, or every time we move, pretty much, that there's a slight change in our position, the touched event fires because it's detecting that movement. So what we're gonna have to do is add a debounce to prevent our us from taking damage multiple times. Obviously this is a server script, so usually you'd probably want to do like individual debounce for each player, but we're just gonna make a universal debounce. I went over how to make a debounce for each player in my dictionaries video. It's probably a good idea to watch that if you want, but so we're just gonna make our debounce variable and we're gonna set it to false. So what we're gonna do inside of our if statement now is we're gonna check if humanoid and not debounce. So what that'll do is check to see if we have a humanoid that's valid, and it'll also just see if debounce is false. And if it is, then we'll set it back to true, which will prevent our script from running, pretty much prevent this take damage line from running multiple times until debounce is set back to false. And we're just going to use the task.wait for a second, and then after that second we'll set it back to false, so that way we can take damage again. So now once we run it, you'll see we go and run over it. You see we only take 10 damage once, but if we stay on it for a while and keep moving around, you'll see every second we take damage because we have a debounce now, right? So there's one more thing I want to go over, which is getting player from the character, because the character's parent is actually workspace. Even though you can do something like player.character to get the player's character, you don't necessarily have the same thing for getting the player if you only have the character, because in this script the only thing we have here is the player's character. So we need a way to get their player in case we want to do something like update their data or fire to the client or change leader stats or something like that. So I'm just gonna make a quick server script for leader stats. I forgot to do this before the video, but it's alright. So I'm just gonna make a basic leader stats script. I've made this like 2 billion times, so I'm not gonna like explain it in detail a whole bunch, right? So what I'm doing is listing on the player added event, and once a player is added to the game, we're creating a leader stats folder, and we're just going to parent it to the player, and then we just create a instance value. We're just going to call it coins. And we'll parent it to the leader stats folder, so that way it knows coins is a leader stat, right? So I'm not gonna go over that too much because I've went over that like too many times in previous videos, but it's alright. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the player's character, and we're going to remove this because we're no longer using it as a way to damage the player. Now what we want to do is get the player. So the way we do this is we get the player service, and the player service actually has a method called get player from character. Very convenient, right? So now all we had to do is pass the player's character as the first argument in this method, which is obviously just going to be the parent of the humanoid, right? Because the humanoid is a child of the character, as we talked about earlier in the video, right? So now we had the player. Now all we now what we can do is just do player.leader stats to get their leader stats folder, and then we can get the coins and then get its value property and increase it by 1 once they touch the part, pretty much, right? So now you'll see once we go ahead and touch the part, we get some coins, and you could even turn this into like an actual coin and have it destroy once the player clicks it, so they can kind of run around the map and collect coins or whatever, right? So that's pretty much how get player from character works, right? Not too complicated. It's pretty cool. It's very convenient. A lot of people get confused on, you know, how to get the player from a touched event, and it's not as complicated as a lot of people make it out to be. They do some crazy stuff, but this is the proper way to do it for sure. So that's pretty much all I really needed to go over for the touched event. Now what I'm going to do is pretty much ask you to make your own script. So for your own script, what I'm going to do, I didn't need to delete all that, but for your own script, what I want you to do is add a tool to workspace, right? And you can actually turn off requires handle for this tool, because we don't actually need the handle for this tool. And basically what your tool is going to do is when the player holds it and they activate the tool, it'll pretty much create like a little explosion around their player. So what it'll do is it'll create a sphere part, and it'll position it to the player's humanoid root part position. And you can even do something like tween its size to make it get bigger over time. And you can listen on the touched event of the part to damage any players that touched it. Obviously you wouldn't want to damage the player that triggered the tool, right? So you'd have to figure out a way of doing that. And also you'd have to figure out a way of, you know, creating the sphere, positioning it correctly, and making it grow over time. You don't have to make it grow over time if that's too complicated for you. Just make a big sphere and position it, and then use the touched event to see who touched it, right? So you can pause the video and try and do that on your own. I highly encourage you try and challenge yourself a little bit, but it's up to you. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over my solution for the script, how I would make it on my own, right? So we got our tool here. We're just going to call this Boom Boy. Yep, that's a good name. So this is going to be our Boom Boy tool, and what it's going to do is once we activate it, we're just going to make a big boom. So tool equals script.parent. I don't know why I'm talking like this. I don't usually use big boom as a descriptive term, but it's okay. So now what we're going to do is listen on its activated event and connect it to our function. And now what we want to do is pretty much create a new sphere. So we're going to make our ball. We could call it boom if we want to. That's the theme we're going with, right? So instance.new part, and we can do boom.shape equals enum.part type ball to make it a ball. We're also going to make it material something else. I'm just going to use smooth plastic, and we'll make its transparency 0.5. We can make its color. We'll make it red, pretty much. That's a pretty decent color, right? And now what we'll do is boom dot position equals. Now once the tool is equipped, right? If you remember from my tools video, it's a child of the character. So all we gotta do is get the tools.parent, and that'll get us the character, and then we can do humanoid root part to get their humanoid root part, which is like their main part in the character, right? It's very It's usually what you'd use for positioning something to a character. And we just get its position to set its position to that, right? Now I'm gonna set it to be anchored. And then what we can do is parent it to workspace. That's the last thing we do. Now we got a boom in workspace. And actually what I want to do is make its size. If I went over, and we can do it. Boom dot size is vector3.new, and we'll start it off at 0, 0, 0. And now I'm going to get tween service. And we'll get tween service, and then we'll get our tween info. And I'm not gonna go crazy with tween info. I'm just gonna give it a duration, and then we'll make our goal. And we'll make it kind of big. We'll make it go up to 8. Alright, and now what we'll do is create our tween, and we'll make it on our boom instance, right? And then we'll give it our tween info and our goal. And then we can play the tween. And actually before that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to listen on its touched event before we play that. So we're going to make a connection to the touched event before we play the tween, so that way once we're playing the tween, it's already listening for something to be touched. And what we're going to do is inside our touched event, and we're going to check to see if the touched part, we gotta get the hit, see if the touched part is the same as our tool.parent, or the touched part's parent. So if, we gotta check for humanoid first, right? So we'll use find first child to get to see if we have a humanoid in the hit's parent. It's supposed to be parent. And then in our if statement, we'll do if hum and humanoid dot parent does not equal tool dot parent. So what that'll do is check to make sure that the humanoid's parent is not the same as the tool dot parent. And if it was, that would mean that it would be ourselves, right? And if it is not, then we'll do humanoid take damage 10. And now what this will do is there's not actually a cooldown for this, so we could do something like create a table called damaged, and we could also add another condition here, and not table find humanoid.parent, or the first argument is going to be the table, and then we'll do humanoid.parent. So what we'll do is inside of here is we'll insert the humanoid's parent to our table. So that way once we damage them, they'll be inside the table, so that way we don't damage them multiple times instead of, I mean, this obviously is kind of not super beginner friendly. It's not something you're going to come up with on your own usually, but if you did, I congratulate you for that, that's for sure. But you didn't have to put this into your script if you didn't want to. So pretty much what it'll do is it'll see if it cannot find the humanoid's parent in our damage table, and if it can't, then it will make them take damage and it'll add them to the table, so that way they can't take damage again, right? So this should work. So now what I'm going to do is, if you didn't notice, I'm doing a local test. So I'm making a local server which will have multiple player games running pretty much. So I believe you guys can see this, right? I don't know why it's not. Okay, there we go. So now you see I have this boom boy part, and I use it, and you can see it does some damage. I had its can collide on, and it obviously doesn't destroy itself, so we can do some modifying. You want to hit clean up to pretty much destroy all that. Clean up all the windows for you. So now what I gotta do is I gotta turn off booms can collide. And we're gonna make its size kind of bigger. We're gonna go for 12. And I'm also going to make it neon instead. And we can make its damage more like 25. And then we'll also get debris service. Or it's actually just called debris, but I like to call it debris service. And we'll, after the tween is done, what we'll do is we'll add the boom to the debris, so it'll get destroyed after 0.6 seconds, which is just a little bit after our tween finishes, pretty much. Right? So now once we'll start it, and if you don't know what debris does, it'll destroy a part after the amount of time that you gave it. So in our case, it's going to delete it after 0.6 seconds because that's what we told it to do. So you'll see I do it now, and you see they get damaged a little bit. You do it again, and it doesn't damage yourself, and it doesn't damage them multiple times, right? And if we have multiple players here, it would damage all of them because we are using a table for our debounce kind of thing. So you can see it's working, right? We can go kind of crazy with this, make a big you know, kind of destroy a player like that. But that's pretty much it for this video. Hopefully it helped you understand touch a little bit better, helped teach you some new concepts, hopefully some important things, and if it did, that's great. Thought I could help. And that's it, and I'll see you.